Hello, my name is Jen Johnson. My pronouns are she and hers, and I am the Director of Orientation, Transition, and Retention. Welcome to today's orientation webinar. As the Orientation Office, we prepare new students and families for the upcoming transition to AU through the coordination of intentional programming. We strive to help every new student connect, belong, and grow within our community. We welcome members of our community to bring their full self to AU. We value human dignity and commit to being empathetic, inclusive, just, and respectful. Our goal is to welcome new Eagles to our community where individuals of all identities and experiences are understood, appreciated, and fully included. In the chat box is a link for live closed captioning. We will be recording this session and posting it to our YouTube channel with captions 24 to 48 hours after this session concludes. You may use the question box feature to ask presenters questions that may be answered live during this session and will be recorded for follow-up as needed. I'll now turn things over to the presenters of Parent and Family Transitions.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it could be good morning in some places or good evening in others. Thank you to all of our families for joining us this afternoon. It is indeed my pleasure and that of my colleagues to be able to spend a little bit of time with you this afternoon. I'm Dr. Fanta, and I'm the Vice President for Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence here at American University. And I'm joined by two of my other colleagues, Karyn Cassella, who's the Associate Director for Parent and Family, Associate Director for Parent and Family Engagement, and then also by Ashley Rozendaal, who's the Director for our Student Success and Student Athlete Support. I want to briefly talk about our objectives for this afternoon. What's most important is for us to leave ample time for your questions to make sure you get some of the answers that you need as you and your students prepare for the fall semester. And so with that, I'm going to ask Karyn to please move the slide to our objectives for today. So really our goal for today, and we're just trying to get our slides here, our goal for today is to really spend some time talking about the kind of the transition of students and making sure that as family members, you understand what some of that transition will involve and how you can be really a partner to us during this transition. The more you know about the student experience, the better you can plan for it and the more you can be a partner to us. Also want to make sure that in that process, you know, the offices and department that are represented and that you will have an opportunity to get to learn more about, that will be here as resources for your students during their time here at the university. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as well. With that said, at the end of the day, it's really about the community of care that we're trying to build here at American University. I often say for every student that comes through our door, there has to be champions for our students. And those champions are our staff, it's our faculty, it's also really their peers as well. So it's important that we build that community of care, and that community of care involves you as an important partner in the success of your student while they're here at American University. Be it in the case of transfer students, 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, I often say whatever that time is, we want to make sure that we are here for your student and that we're here for you as well. So with that, we're going to jump right into some of the sessions, some of the key things for the session. I keep going back to the fact that it's a journey. And as a journey, there's not a right way or a wrong way on this journey. Every student has their own journey and every student needs to kind of figure out their way. But what we do have are some tips. We've been able to spend a lot of time with students over the many, many years that Ashley, myself, and Karyn and others here at the university have been working at the university. And over this period of time, we've been able to sort of collect what I call a list of things that we know work. And we know that work across student populations. And we want to take the time to share some of that with you as we begin this journey. So here are a couple of things that I would like for us to kind of go through. First and foremost, and I hear this all the time, there is a lot to stay on top of. There's a lot of materials to read, and I know that sometimes it can be challenging. And to be honest with you, we know that we are continuing to evaluate our own communication and the ways in which we can better communicate to students and to families. But what is most important is it's really, really important to read what we send you. We will be sending information to students via their AU@American email address. So it will be incredibly important for your students to make sure that if they're using a Gmail, a Yahoo, or Hotmail, that they forward their American University email to whatever is going to be their primary email. any official communication from the university will be via those sources. So if your student is receiving something from American University via email and it doesn't seem to have that American.edu, it is not coming from American University. And this is important because there's a lot of phishing that's going on with technology today, but they read what we send. And we know that a lot of times there'll be the families really who'll be reading much of it and then spending time with their students. But first and foremost, please read what we send you. Generally, it is time sensitive and it's information that we feel really needs to be in the form of an email. That's the first advice. Second advice is this, and that is, I think it's important for, so when we were doing this, there's lots of things that we hear from our students a lot. And we often go back to our students and we go back to also our families. And we ask them, if you had an opportunity to speak to families, what would you tell them? Based on your own experience, what would you tell them? And the first and most important thing is we all need to embrace the growth opportunity. There will be growth opportunity for all students. And I know for transfer students, it's particularly important because transfer students will be coming from other institutions. And so they would have had the benefit of having been in an institution before and kind of have a sense of what college is. But every college is different. And so there will be still growth for our transfer students who will be coming from other colleges. The culture is different. What you call something will be different, etc. So the more we can all be ready to embrace the growth opportunity, the better it is. And so that's one of our first and most important advice. I hear a lot from students that were like, wow, I didn't realize that my student was going to grow this much. Or I thought, you know what, my student had figured these things out, and now I'm figuring out that, well, I thought they had figured all of these things out, but no, it's not as obvious. And so again, the more we can keep our, we can keep an open mind to this growth opportunity, the better it's going to be. Next slide is, I always say to students, because I also am a faculty member, so I wear a dual hat. And I always say to all of our students, and Ashley, I'm sure, says this as well in her role, and we always say to students, part of the important thing of college is to do your homework. And part of doing your homework is make sure that you've gotten the lay of the land. Make sure you know what is factual information from what is not. Make sure that you're getting the information from the right sources. I often will hear students say, well, my friend said. And again, I always say, you know what, keep your friends close and make sure that they're your real friends, but you really can be listening to advices from your friends on things that are academic related, things that may be health and wellness related, things that may be related to policies and procedures. As your friends, they want to do the best that they can. So I don't have any doubt of their goodwill and good intentions, but it's really, really important to make sure you're getting information from the right sources. Otherwise, it's going to lead to confusion. And then before you know it, it will, what we call these myths keep living on, and it takes a life of its own. And we want to really avoid that. So this piece about doing your homework is an important part of it. And then next slide. This is an important one, assume goodwill. We live in a culture right now where everything is at a boiling point, it's at a tension point. And this piece always comes up. When there are complications, when there are difficulties, I think there's a tendency to assume perhaps on one side or the other that there are things that are being done intentionally and that it is not helpful. It's really important that in this partnership of families and ourselves and with students, that we all come into this partnership assuming goodwill of each other. And really, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want to see students who come to American who thrive. We want to see students who come who can live out their aspirations and their goals. We want to see students who graduate from American University. We want to see them walk, on that stage, and that they can really look with pride about what they have accomplished, and that we can be there to cheer them on. And so this piece about assuming goodwill, in that we all want the same thing, and that is the student's ability to thrive and the student ability to be supported and to grow. Those are the things that we want. And so assuming goodwill is important. Next slide. Okay, remember that there are many sides to a story. It is important to hear all sides and suspend judgment. This happens a lot. We may hear, a situation where a family member will contact us and said, my student said X, Y, and Z, and I'm really shocked that the university has not been there to support the student. And, and there's this problem with this office, and I'm not sure what's going on, but I really need, I need better responsiveness from the institution or X, Y, and Z. And what I often say is that it has been our experience. Having worked in this field for 30 years, I have seen, every time I keep saying I've seen it all, I'm surprised again and again. So I've stopped saying I've seen it all, because each time that I say that, I have to eat my words, because something else comes that is a learning opportunity and frankly a growth opportunity for myself. And I often say there's always many sides to a story. Certainly that is the experience of your student, and it comes from a perspective, and it's important for us to hear that and to honor that. But 9 times out of 10, when you start talking with us, you will find that the story is so much more nuanced. There's so many other parts to it. And this is the other reason why assuming goodwill is important. And then let's work through to understand what is the fuller picture of the story that we have in front of us, so we can get to the place of solving those issues before they become boiling points. But you will hear from my team a lot. Well, yes, they'll listen, and they'll listen intently. Um, and they will basically, things that they can share, they'll be able to share. But also sometimes our side of the story is harder to tell, because we are in many ways, we're constrained. Because of FERPA, the Family Education Right to Privacy Act, there's some things that we can't just share. And sometimes students are very aware of that. And so they'll say one part of it, knowing that we can't really say parts that have to do with their privacy, and to really, in many ways, respect their privacy. So if they've signed, the FERPA release, then we can say a lot more about that. But when we say to you, sorry, this is not exactly the full story, but we're not in a position to say much more about that, that's because we're constrained by FERPA. And it's important for all of us to understand that as well. Next slide. So your students also have some advice for you. We've been able to collect over this period of time what your students have had to say about their experiences as well. And there are a couple of things that seems to be a recurrent theme that we want to kind of share with you. And those seems to be timeless in many ways. I've seen these things come up, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago. So I find it interesting that the student population changes, but some of these advices tend to be a little bit more timeless. So we'll start with the first one from our young adults and what they're telling us. They often will say, listen and give advice when asked. We hear this a lot, because students will come to us, and Ashley and others will hear this a lot. Well, this is really what I'm thinking, but this is what my family says, or this is what my family would want to see happen, or this is what my mom and dad said I should do, et cetera, and so forth. And when the students talk to us about that, we'll often say to them, okay, that's important. And it's important, given that you have a really close relationship to your family, and they know you better than we do on many occasions. It's important to have those conversations. But often what we find is that the students are then really in many ways conflicted, right? They're conflicted between what they think they should be doing, and what maybe their families may be, asking of them. And so often when we say to students, what advice do you have for your families? They'll say, please say to our families, please, please listen and give advice when asked. Because part of college is, yes, we're going to stumble. Part of college is we're not going to get it always right. And the key thing is they need to be there to help support us. And certainly we appreciate them giving us advice, particularly on things that we know are really going to be bad for us. But it's important that there be that listening and that trust that's there. And sometimes we will say to you the same thing. If you know your student is really putting themselves in situations that are dangerous, but that are really not going to be, they're going to be very detrimental to them, don't wait for the advice. Don't wait for them to ask. Please offer your advice. We will be offering advice as well. Let's work as a team on helping to provide the wraparound support that students sometimes will need. I always say we're going to make mistakes. All of us make mistakes, and students are going to make mistakes. That is part of what it means to be a college student. We don't want the mistakes to be so devastating and detrimental that in some ways they don't feel like they can bounce back from that. There are very few instances where that happens, but there are instances where that can happen, right? Particularly when we start talking about drugs and alcohol, when we start talking about putting themselves in very risky behaviors that really can have a devastating impact on them, both physically and emotionally and so forth. Those are the types of things that we want to all be watching for. Next slide. Don't believe everything you read on my social media account. I think it's safe to say we're all from different generations, so I'm going to date myself a little bit. I'm still one who's struggling with really understanding the full platform of social media. I'm blown away in many cases about how much our students and our young people feel comfortable disclosing as much as possible. But this is their time. This is the platform that they're used to. This is the way in which they communicate. Again, that's how it is, and we should all sort of accept that. By the same token, again, with social media, we often say to our students, beware. You will be posting some things. Know that those are things that employers will be looking at eventually. Know that those are things that also you don't want to be posting things on social media, once again, where you can put yourself at risk, right? With strangers and with others who do not know you, where in fact they can have your location, they can have that kind of information that is very sensitive information. So, often students will say, I thought that was a private social media that I had with my friends, only to realize, well, it's not as private. It's much more public than they had imagined. But they'll often say, yes, I know my dad and mom are checking my social media, and it's spooky in some cases, and in other cases they're like, I'm fine with my parents checking my social media. That's between you and your student, what agreements you have around those pieces and how you decide to communicate. It's not for us to determine what that looks like. But they often will say, please don't believe everything you read on my social media, because I often say there's the private self and there's the public self. And we find that our students have both the private self and the public self. And sometimes those two do not exactly mesh, right? They don't exactly mesh. And you're like, who is this person? Sometimes I've had parents who said, is that my student? I can't, and I'm like, well, there's a public self and there's a private self. So something we're certainly all learning with social media. Next one. Just because I don't call you right back, doesn't mean that something is wrong. Don't panic. So I laugh a lot about this because sometimes I hear from parents saying, oh my goodness, I haven't heard from my student. And I'm really, really worried about them because this is not like them. And then I'll ask, well, how long have you not heard from your student? And they'll be like, well, my student speaks to me generally almost every 2 hours, every 3 hours, or maybe, twice a day or 3 times a day. And that has not happened today. And I often say to them, please don't panic. And the reason don't panic is because as they begin to adjust to the new campus, and as time passes by, where they were perhaps more frequent in their communication at the onset, with period of time, the more they adjust to this new environment, the less likely perhaps they are to communicate. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. What it means is that they're now finding a bit more of a second home here. They're beginning to forge relationships with their peers. Their schedule may be packed because they're doing all the right things that we want them to do, which is go to class, make sure you're studying, make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, and then make sure you're availing yourself of the support through the academic support and access center and so forth, etc. So they're doing all the right things, but it means that their days are full and full. So when we get these calls from parents who are frantic, I haven't heard anything, 9 times out of 10, what we'll do is we'll contact their student and say, your dad or mom are looking for you, or or your a family member is looking for you. Please give them a call back. And so we say this to say, the more they adjust, the more you should expect this to become a pattern. And we want to make sure that you're not panicking because of that shift in their communication. Next one, please. Please don't disappear. Keep things from me. I can handle it. This is a big one. We'll get calls through the Dean of Students office or different offices, and where a parent will say, I really, really need to speak to you, and I need to share something with you confidentially, but I really am asking that you don't tell my student. We will always be here to listen because it's important for us to get that information, because it's context that we need to understand perhaps what may be going on with the student and so forth. And we will do our best to listen as well. But one of the things that will be common is that you'll hear from a lot of us will say, okay, after listening, we might give our take on how this may be, there might be ways to handle that. But we may also say to you, you know what, this is one of those moments where a conversation with your student is going to be really important, because this is about trust and it's also about their growth and so forth. And so in those cases, we may come back to you and say, we've heard you, but we think this is one that really requires that kind of facilitated direct conversation with your student, because it's important that it comes from you. So that's one aspect. Times when it may be different, of course, we hope this doesn't happen to in any instance, but it happens periodically, where there may be the loss of a family member. And in situations like this, you may be far away and you may not want to have that shared, you may not want to share that directly with your student without knowing that your student has a support system nearby. In those instances, if you come and you talk to us about it, we will work with you on what would be the best way to inform this student, knowing that there perhaps needs to be a community director and or an advisor and or a staff member who's present, so that we can then pick up from there and provide that student that support in communication and information that really can be jarring for them. But most of the times you will hear us say, let's talk through a strategy on how you and your student can communicate, so that that trust is there. Next one. Treat us like adults, but never forget that we'll always be your children. We love you and we miss you, even if we don't tell you very often. Now, we get to hear this a lot, right? So sometimes you'll ask your students, how are you doing? Great. Do you miss home? No, not really. Have you made friends? Yes. So you hear those routine things. But we get the benefit of hearing from them. Yes, I've made friends. Yes, I find my routine and everything, but I really, really, really miss home, right? How can they not? Home is where they've been. It's been the comfort place. It's been, it's been the rock. It's been sort of that stabilizer for them. So know that in many ways, they will always miss home and it will always be home. Our goal is not to replace that home. Our goal is to create a second home for them, knowing that that's going to be a landing place for them while they're here. So know that your students definitely will be missing you a lot, even if they don't say it. And part of the reason they won't say that to you is because they really don't want you to perhaps worry and so forth. And again, I think with transfer students, it's a bit more tricky because transfer students feel like there's a bigger need to, in many ways, be okay, right? Because they've been through college before, because this is not their first time. So in many cases, I think transfer students will camouflage this even more than our first year students. And so that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. And this is why the transfer experience and us paying attention to the transfer experience is even more important. Next one. So again, remember it's a journey. And as you look at this journey, it is never a straight path, right? There's going to be curves along the way. There's going to be, turns that are sort of sharp turns. And then sometimes it's going to be a straight path for just a few. So know that this is really how the journey looks. And again, there's no right or wrong. It is simply that, a journey. Next one, Karyn. Okay. So this piece I think is important. What we know from research, and it really doesn't matter whether they're transfer students or first year students, we know that the first 6 weeks are going to be the most challenging, period. There's so much change, right? Change from where they were before to where they are now, change with new faculty member, creating a community of their own. And now in the COVID-19, my gosh, talk about change with everything that comes with the COVID-19 period and so forth, with health and safety measures and lots of things that can produce anxiety as a result of all of this change. When they first get here, they're going to find what we call sort of the honeymoon period. Everything looks great. Everything feels good. They're making friendships. They're getting into their routine. And then what you'll see is they get their first assignments, and then it may not be what they expected. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? My world is kind of coming undone. And we know when that period is. Then, they kind of bounce back from that because they realize, no, this is not the end of the world. It's just going to be part of the transition. And so then they continue. And then in some cases, they're very much more relaxed. So social connections are continuing to be made. Then we get into the midterm and so forth. And it's like, boom, another thing has happened. It's like, wow, I have only a few more weeks left. How am I going to catch up? What am I going to need to do? What does this look like? And so forth, etc. And then, hopefully they kind of bounce back to get into finals and get to the end of the semester. The first 6 weeks is what we call the red zone. During the red zone is when you can see a lot of shifting from I love it here to I really hate this place to, I really feel like I've gotten support to nobody is here to support me and listen to me, especially when they're getting advice that is advice that they really don't want to hear and are trying to run away from. There'll be a lot of that will be taking place during the first 6 weeks. So we always call the first 6 weeks the red zone. And we talk to students about that so that they can anticipate that. For most students, they'll get it out of this. There'll be that period of time and they're fine and they're going to be able to move forward. The students that we get most concerned about are the students who really, during this period of time, even though the advisor is reaching out, they're not reaching out at all back, right? Even though, there may be recommendation made to them to follow up on doing X, Y, and Z, and the student really is not responding and is many ways despondent, that's when we begin to kind of worry. If that stays the course for a period of time, we know that there's something else that's going on with that student, and we all want to be eyes and ears to help support that student. So we'll move to the next one. Campus resources. We have lots and lots of campus resources. The Dean of Students Office, they'll be hearing from the Dean of Students Office. That's sort of the place that does case management. When in doubt, you can start with the Dean of Students Office. Academic Support and Access Center. There's a lot going on there, including our disability. The disability support services are part of our Academic Support and Access Center. They do everything from writing support to time management, to the whole list and so forth. And Ashley certainly during the Q&A can talk more about that. We also have our counseling center where we have therapists who are licensed therapists who work out of our counseling center, and that's important. And then we have also a Center for Diversity and Inclusion that's here to support our LGBTQ, our first generation students, our students of color, and other students who are interested in issues of racial equity, issues of multiculturalism, etc. Then we have our student health center that is staffed by a medical director, as well as registered nurses and others that work on a range of student-related areas. And then we have student conduct and conflict resolution. I would say to parents, if you never have to know that office, that's perfectly fine. We would not be offended if you didn't know that office. That's the office that's really about making sure that students are respecting our community norms, and that in respecting our community norms, that they really are in many ways espousing our values of what it means to be in community and of community. And then we have our health promotion and advocacy center that is about really think about wellness and how we think about wellness. These are some of the campus resources. It's by no means a comprehensive list. We have our financial aid office with financial aid advisors and others who are there as well. The residence life team, our AU Central folks, our financial aid office, and then you have our academic advisors for second year and beyond. So we have a team, and this is called what I call sort of the wraparound support that's here at the institution level to be in partnerships with your students and with you. And so, Karyn, next one. Three things here. FERPA, I already talked about the Family Education Right and Privacy Act. This really constrains us in terms of what information we can share. If you contact us and say, I'm calling to find out the grades of my students, we'll have to say to you, sorry, but that's not information we can share without the student consent. So there's lots of things that are constrained under FERPA. And so you will be giving instruction on how you can sign off, on how your students can sign off and give you permission to access, and it has to be specific to what kind of information. The proxy access is an access on the portal whereby your student can give you access to the portal so that you can go in and see some of the same things that your student can see. You won't be able to see everything that your student sees, but you'll be able to see some things such as the student bill and things like that that are part of the proxy access, and your student will be the one to give that to you. And then we have HIPAA, which is, I think all of us who have health insurance know that when we go to see our medical professional, they always have us sign this long sheet with lots written on it about making sure that we know that that HIPAA is that they're HIPAA compliant, and it's all about the privacy piece of medical information for for your students. Those are some of the access and constraints, and you'll be able to get those pieces kind of sorted out with our team. And then key conversations before we start the semester: safety. We'll be sending a lot of communication about safety and health, particularly in COVID-19. Drugs and alcohol. We have students who may be coming from parts of the country where marijuana is legal, and marijuana very much, is legal in DC if you're of a certain age, but we keep reminding people it is not legal on campus. So that's really important and so forth. Alcohol, we have seen, is often the medication of choice for students in trying to numb a lot of things. And so we certainly pay a lot of attention to issues around alcohol. And then it's going to be important to understand the policies and procedures. We'll be sending those to you all. And then Karyn manages our family and parent communication. So you'll be receiving regular communication from us around a range of things that'll be coming into the inboxes. The last thing is, we hear from students whenever we poll them, the number one thing they tell us is the most difficult thing for our students is to seek help. We know this, and it's great that they want to be adults, and it's great that they want to take responsibility for their own development and learning. That's something that we all admire, but we also want to make sure that students know that we're here to help support, and that asking for help is not a weakness. I often say actually it takes courage, and it's important for students to know that that's something that we encourage all of them to do if and when it's needed. And with that, consideration for fall. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19. For every student who will be coming this fall, they will be required to wear a mask. That is a requirement at every time they're on campus and anywhere on campus. They'll be also required to maintain physical distance of 6 feet at all times. Also, in the case of our students, there will be a mandatory training for all of our students and staff and faculty on COVID-19 and how to keep yourself safe and keep others safe. They will also all sign an attestation, quote, an agreement, basically indicating that they understand what I call our rules of engagement, our community norms are. And then there will be also self-monitoring, daily self-monitoring. There will be a tool that will be provided for daily self-monitoring that we will be providing to students. This will apply to any and every student who will have a physical presence on campus at any point in time, whether they live off campus and need to come on campus, or whether they live on campus and need to use the services and programs. That's going to be very, very important that everybody be made aware of that. And then we will be putting in place also our testing protocols, our isolation protocols, quarantine protocols, as well as what the contact tracing is going to be with the Department of Health. But those are some of the considerations that we wanted to make sure people were aware of it. So this will not be a normal fall. I know we all keep saying that, but it really is the case that it will be somewhat of a different fall. And so we are challenging our students to know how to engage and build communities in all different ways, but to do it really in safe ways, because that's probably our most primary concern. Is as you look at the number of cases and you look at how it's evolving rapidly across the country, Washington, DMV area so far, cross fingers, has been able to kind of contain it. But we know that part of containing it is making sure that everyone is doing their part around health and safety, and it's going to take all of us to do that. And community of care is really about support. It's about where you can students can get advice, where they can get help, and what are some of the guidance that are provided. We will continue to message that to students at all times, and some of the guardrails around the community of care. So we have first year advising, because some of your transfer students will be in the category of that. Residence life and housing. There'll be things like early warning reports for students who may be starting to miss classes and everything. And then care reports are reports that are put in by members of the community if they have a concern, maybe about a student, to make sure that someone is paying attention, and then someone can do the appropriate outreach. Those are some of the guardrails that we have in place to help support. And in the case of transfer students, definitely your academic advisors in your schools are part of that community of care as well. Okay. No, this is a partnership. I can't say that enough. This will only work if we're working in partnership. This will only work if there's a relationship of trust. This will only work if there's open communication, even sometimes when it's around difficult conversations to be had. But this is what the partnership, I think, is gonna require of each and every one of us. And so I'll stop there. And Karyn, we will take some questions. And what I would like to do before we take some questions, I'll ask Ashley to talk briefly about some of the things that transfer students in particular can expect in coming in terms of this community of care and the support.
Sure, thank you, Fanta. So one thing that has been a common question that we've gotten from a lot of transfer students and their parents is how to connect and how to make friends and build relationships, whether they're on campus or they're learning virtually. And so we have a number of different opportunities that we are going to send out to all the transfer students, and those are going to happen through different facets. So one of the most important relationships for an incoming transfer student is their academic advisor. And we worked closely with the different academic units. They have specialized workshops for the transfer students. They have special opportunities for registration as your students prepare to register for the spring semester. There will be transfer specific trainings and opportunities to register for classes. Academic support. So as Dr. Ah shared, our academic support is actually open now. And so if your transfer student is wanting to start to prepare for this transition to AU, is wanting to work on time management, on reading strategies, note taking, or if there's areas that were difficult for them in their previous institution, we have a team of academic coaches that are available to any transfer student, to any student at the university. You do not need to have an academic accommodation to utilize that service, but we will have those one-on-one appointments with a professional academic coach are available. And again, that's available now, which is great. We also, most of our transfers will enroll in our AUX1, our AU experience course, and they will be enrolled in a section specifically for transfers. So this is another great way for the transfers to start to build that community with each other as a cohort, but then to get to know their peer leader, to get to know their instructor, and it's just going to really open up some doors. And then we also are going to have a fall transfer event series that we'll be announcing to the transfer students soon. That will be different workshops, different connections with the Career Center, really pulling in these resources from across campus so that the transfer students really kind of see early on all the different resources they can utilize and then what is specific to them as they transition into the university.
Thank you, Ashley. Helpful. So that we're now going to open it up to questions. So Karyn, would you like to please help us with some of the questions you're hearing?
Sure. I'm also going to put up my slide here for a second.
Yes, please.
Just so families get a better picture of what kind of resources are available to support you. We've listed a couple of items here. One, the first is our new parent and family website, refreshed. You'll find links for everything from hotels to where do you ship packages on campus, and find copies of our old newsletters, all kinds of good stuff. We also recommend that you follow us on Facebook. The official American University Parents page is listed here. You see this big logo in the center of the page for AU Parents. When you spot that on Facebook, you'll know that you're on the official page. There's a number of social media accounts for parents. We're going to recommend that if you're looking for the official sources, that you look for this one. We also send out family newsletters, 1 or 2 a month. Those will come out to you automatically. Also throughout the year, we do a number of live webinars and educational topics explaining how things work on campus and what to expect from your student. And then you've got dedicated staff like myself who will happily answer questions through auparent@american.edu. You can reach us anytime. In terms of questions, Fanta, I think one of the big ones for this group in this time is really, like Ashley kind of talked about some of the transfer programming that's coming up, but what should students expect in this time of social distancing for finding ways to connect? Like, will we have speakers and clubs, and will Case Spiritual Life Center be open for services, and those kind of things?
Great question. These are important questions, and these are questions certainly to expect. So there are a couple of things. We certainly will have our clubs and organizations that'll be here, whether it's the Eagle, the student newspaper, whether it is our different organizations that are on campus. We will have those that will be very much here, and they'll be engaged, and they'll be working with our Center for Student Involvement and others to really help. In addition, on the academic side, we have a lot of peer facilitators, peer sort of what I call tutors and others that are also really important for students to be able to engage with. It is going to be the case that what we will be avoiding are large gathering. We are really, especially at the beginning of the semester, we know during the first 3 weeks of the semester, it's going to be incredibly important that we get everybody into the mode of socializing around face coverings, physical distancing, good hygiene, and so forth, etc. Because the last thing we want to do is to be in a situation where we get an outbreak in either the university and or in DC proper. So yes, there'll be clubs and organizations. There'll be the intramural clubs will be available. Our fitness center will be available. We know that's very important for wellness. It will be available only to students so that we can limit the density, and they'll be able to indicate how many students can come in at once and all of that. So we'll have those pieces that are there. And then, so there will be a lot of those things that are there. And also all of our buildings will be made open, and there'll be, we will be providing what we call a guide to life on campus that would include academic support, financial aid. All of those resources will be made available so that you understand what these things are and how you access them. But one of the key things will be really to limit. Students, of course, will be engaging with each other, but we really do want to limit those mass gatherings. There will be speakers, yes. Being in Washington, one of the joys to be able to invite high profile speakers. So we'll be doing some of those initially, basically online with students engaging with them and in conversation with them. That's going to be important. Also for the October break, we're eliminating the October break so that we can actually have skill development workshops where we can bring in alumni, we can bring in, parents with specific skill sets and information, as well as staff. A lot of our staff have a lot of talents in many areas. We will bring folks together to provide skill development throughout an entire kind of almost 3 days that are available for students to be able to connect, network, and so forth. So there will be quite a few of those that will be provided. What we will not have is what I think we've kind of imagined in campus, those parties. We're not having those parties. Not for all the things I think everywhere you've seen in the country, when you've seen, these outbreaks and you've seen cases go up, it's because there's been these mass gatherings, and these mass gatherings have been without physical distancing, without mask and so forth. We really as a community will have to work on those things.
Sorry, I muted myself. So questions about, like a lot of transfer students have come to or chosen AU because of our location and our proximity and all the great resources in Washington. So Fanta, what what can we expect about being able to still engage with the city at this time?
And Ashley can chime in as well. So we will be following the guidance of the city, right? The city is in phase 2 as we speak. If things go okay and we don't have any major issues, we'll be in phase 3. And as you very well know, with phase 2, it means some of our areas are already open. Students certainly with the metro system and all of those are beginning to run in terms of transportation systems. They'll be able to go out into the city. And as things improve, museums and things will be open with physical distancing and all of that. Some of the restaurants also will be open, but with limited capacity so that students know what's going on. So certainly already now, if you're in Washington, D.C. or the DMV area, you're seeing people out and about. But the city has also been very clear that in being out and about, let's be careful. Let's make sure that we're pacing ourselves and that we're not all just going out there as if everything is back to 100%. So certainly being in the city, you'll be able to leverage the city and all the assets of this city, from keynote speakers to what are our major landmarks here in Washington, to what hopefully will be nice weather in late August, September through October. That's one of the things, being an arboretum, a registered arboretum, for people who come to the campus is absolutely gorgeous. And we want our students to be able to enjoy that as well, in addition to what the city offers.
Great. Here's one that Ashley, I think, can help us out with. So it's kind of twofold. One, given how much instruction is going to be online this year, like, one, when are we going to know from our faculty what the format is for their classes? And two, if they didn't have a great experience with online instruction before, what kind of resources is AU offering to help our students to learn better online, right?
Yeah, those are great questions. So very soon, every course through the schedule of classes will actually have an indication of what modality it'll be taught in. So the students will be able to see on the university schedule of classes, which is linked through the registrar's office. They can also see it through their portal through Eagle Service. So that'll be available soon. In regards to preparing for online learning, I do highly recommend our academic coaching service. We are already working with incoming freshmen, incoming transfers, returning students, but developing a plan. I think time management is a really important piece of online learning. So being able to develop a system and a structure that works best for your student. An academic coach will really get to know your student one-on-one and will be able to kind of piece together with them, what were those areas of difficulty? So in the past, was it that, different classes were running in different, models or different timelines? Was it that they needed to have dedicated time or space to learn, and how will they achieve that when they're learning at AU? But I think the academic coaching is a great first step, especially now during the summer. And then once this fall semester starts, I think utilizing faculty office hours. So our faculty are outstanding at the university. They will work with your student to determine, what is the way that they can start to adjust to learning in their specific course. And then, a number of the other offices that Dr. Ah has spoken of, being able to kind of build that relationship and get advice from their peers, from other peer educators, from other faculty and staff at the university. I think we're all in this together as we adjust to more online learning.
And to follow up on some of what Ashley talked about as well, our faculty have been incredibly busy getting ready for the fall. And I know that they've been spending a lot of time on really leveraging the different platforms from online learning to make sure that the online learning can be as interactive as possible, and where there's really the opportunity for some high touch as well. And so we definitely know that that's something that students value, and also frankly something that faculty enjoy, and faculty want to have, really want to get to know their students. So whether it's office hours, whether it's the classroom and the ways you can really make those lectures more interactive, whether it's breaking, the sort of breaking up into smaller groups for small group work, etc. All of those modalities will be very much incorporated in the online learning that will be taking place as well, in addition to the support that Ashley talked about. Toward later this week, students will be receiving a communication from the university about the modalities of teaching and how to find that information, in addition to the portal that Ashley mentioned where it has the terminology. Also, the schools will also have a website with a list of all the courses and will indicate the modalities for those courses. So stay tuned toward later this week. There'll be a communication coming out to let you all know that part has been done so that everyone can go and find that information for their respective classes.
That will be so helpful. Fanta, I'm going to lob this one back over your way. You know, given all of the upheaval with COVID-19, we've had a lot of families who've experienced some significant financial changes at home. What kind of resources is AU making available? What would be the next step for a family who's just feeling kind of really strapped right now?
So there are a couple of things. One is that every student has a financial aid counselor. And so if there's any change in family circumstances, whether it's income, job loss, other types of challenges, it's really important that the students basically reach out to their financial aid counselor through an appeal process. And the financial aid counselors know that this is a very unprecedented and unusual time. And so we'll be evaluating students' sort of need based on that. So the first step is reach out to your financial aid counselor and explain very clearly what is the situation and what is the issue and difficulty. That's one of the big and important pieces that they can help with. Also, for students who may find themselves who will be studying online, fully, and who may have some issues with access to technology or access to Wi-Fi and so forth, we will be putting together some resources to help support those students during that period of time. In addition, our library is scanning pretty much all of the major kind of work that is needed so that we can try to alleviate some of the pressures that comes with book ordering and things like that. They continue to augment that because we also know that the cost of books can be really expensive for families. So that's another thing that will be available to students and to their families. We know these are very hard times, and we know that these are unprecedented times. So make sure you reach out to the financial aid office for them to be able to evaluate on a case by case.
Okay, I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. Fanta, it's a tough transition, I think, for a lot of families coming from K-12 to college and recognizing when they're going to expect to hear what kinds of information from the university and when we're going to route that to the students to share with their families. Can you talk a little bit more about what families should expect in terms of the kind of information we share with them and the kind of information that's only going to their students? I mean, beyond FERPA, I know a lot of folks
So I think the big ones,
Yeah.
So I think the big ones you can expect is anything that requires a student to sign off on or to help to make a decision on, it's going to the student. Because it's really important in terms of the university relationship to the student that it goes to the student. So those are things that you can expect will be going directly to the student, which is like, for example, do you want to add and drop, or you're on a wait list. How do you move from a wait list to the class that you're taking? Those are things like the advisors have to be in communication with their students, right? The same way that if they're going to the Academic Support and Access Center and it's a conversation around disability accommodation, it's really, really important that those that our team are able to work directly with the students and so forth. So those things would be going straight to the students. Information about how to, that are like information like how to get housing, how to apply for your classes, how to appeal for financial aid. That are those types of information, we will try to mirror that for families, because we know that when the student gets it, it's important for the families to get it so that the families can help support the students through those processes. So that will be forthcoming as we kind of move forward. The families will be receiving all health and safety updates because we want to make sure that it's not only the students who are getting that, but that the families are getting that so that they can be our partners in supporting our students to make sure that everyone is complying with the health and safety guidelines. That's an example of information that you'll be receiving, and we'll be sending those information on a very regular basis. And Karyn in particular, with the sort of the family newsletter that goes out, we'll have several sections that are resource sections of deadlines that are coming up. Campus resources that you need to be aware of because we're not going to get into that cycle. Reminders of things that have been sent to students, but that we feel the family should also be made aware of. So one of the things that you'll hear, particularly for families who've been at different universities, you will hear that's one of the feedback that we get that I think is important, and we want to keep it that way. We hear a lot from our families that we actually communicate a lot more with parents and families than a lot of other places. That's intentional on our part because it is about the partnership. You can't be a good partner to us if you don't know. And so the more you know, the more you can be good partners to us as we help support your student and help them succeed.
Great. As a little bit of a follow-up, and maybe Ashley can help with this. So if a family's concerned about their student's academic performance, what would be a reasonable course of action? Like, what would you recommend?
So my advice is actually always to start with your academic advisor. I think an academic advisor is a great person to kind of assess the student situation, what grade outcomes has the student received, and really kind of coach the student through the next step. That might be, coaching them through communication with their faculty member. It might be connecting with the Dean of Students office. It might be working with the Academic Support and Access Center, right? There might be different facets depending on the student, but I think it's just remembering that it is a huge community of support, that we are a small enough university and that all of these offices work so closely together that we really are able to work with an individual student and really help coach them through, the support that they need for their academics. So I think the first step is meeting with an academic advisor. And then once the student starts to build relationships around campus, they might have a better sense of whom their next step is to go to if it's not their advisor.
And I think to follow up on what Ashley talked about, I think it's really important. We've seen a lot of times when students have really, in many ways, struggled in ways that has been hard for them to quickly recover, is because we find that they've been in touch with no one. To me, it doesn't really matter where you start, but start somewhere. And as Ashley said, there's sort of this, what I call this web of network, where in starting somewhere, that becomes that entry door to other places. So if we have nothing else for you to remember, is there this piece about start somewhere, talk to someone, and then they can try to help figure it out. That's a really, really important part of it, because if the student doesn't speak to anyone, that becomes, I think, much more challenging. And I think it's even harder because when you're transfer students, you come in with this notion that you should have figured it out, right? That because you've been at another school, you should have figured it out. So if you didn't figure it out, it must be something wrong with you, or because, so it's really, really important to understand that it's a different culture, different institutions. So please start somewhere.
All right, to wrap us up, I want to see Ashley and Fanta. What would you say you're most excited for these incoming transfers? What should they get excited about with the fall? There's so much anxiety in the air, but what should we be looking forward to?
I think it's making new connections and new beginnings. I think new beginnings always have their level of anxiety, but they have so much, I think, excitement that comes with it. So they should really look forward to new beginnings and new connections.
Yeah, and I think similarly, I would say just this is an exciting fresh start. I think that your student chose American University for a specific reason, and we're just so excited to support them and to be with them along this journey, and just that it is this new chapter for them, and it can be really exciting, even though it maybe is a little unexpected with everything going on in our country. But it is such an amazing fresh start for them, and we're excited to welcome them.
Karyn, anything you want to add before we close?
No, I would just say again, my email is up here, auparent@american. No question is a silly question. We're happy to hear from all of you, and reach out if we can be of any level of support to parents and families. That's my job. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the fall.
Thank you again to all of you. Please be well, be safe wherever you are, in the country or outside of the country. We look forward to the fall, and we really look forward to meeting your students and to be on the journey with them and with you. We very much look forward to that. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. And again, like I said, if you're in a different time zone, wherever you are, please be well, please be safe. Thank you to all of you. And a big thanks to Ashley and to Karyn for really the important teamwork on this. Thank you.